Hi, welcome to tonight's session. We are still letting people in, but I thought better make a start. It's so lovely to have you here this evening, and it shows how needed it is. My name is Jane Ring. I'm the Parent Support Officer from Look UK. We're hosting tonight, and my colleague Jo is in the background. She's project assistant, and she's letting people in, and she'll be keeping an eye and making lots of notes this evening. I will introduce the wonderful panel members and my colleague Charlotte from Victor, but before I do, I just want to go through some housekeeping. So we are recording this session, so if you want to turn your cameras off. Sorry, the cat is just come in for attention, because of course that's going to happen. And yeah, please turn your cameras off unless you're happy to be on the recording afterwards. It will go on our website because not everyone's able to make it, and it means that others can hear the wisdom of the panel members. If we keep muted until it's time for questions, and then you're free to put your hands up or ask them in chat. We will keep the chat function open, so if while one of the panel members is speaking you think of a question, write it in chat, and Charlotte will make sure it's asked when we have our pauses for questions. So we're really lucky tonight that we've got a huge mixture of very much lived experience. Fellow charities have come to support, and yeah, it's really good. It's so important talking about anxiety. I know as a parent carer myself that I carry a lot of anxiety because it can be quite overwhelming, worrying about your child's future, not knowing what's going to happen, and lots of things that happen can feel out of our control, but there are ways we can support ourselves and ways that we can support our children, which you will hear from tonight. So I hope that you find it really informative. We might not be able to answer all your questions, but if you have follow-ups, then please email me, and between us we'll do our best to get you the answers as well. So I now want to introduce you to Charlotte from Victor.
Yes, hello. As Jane said, I'm Charlotte from Victor. I work in parent services, and I do very similar role to Jane at Victor. Victor support services for parents are made up of the Victor Parents dedicated website, the online support group called the Victor Parent Network, and what we're doing tonight is also part of the Victor workshop program. Sometimes myself and Jane, especially on a big complicated complex topics like mental health, we do feel that joining forces and drawing strength from each other's organisations and the access that we have to panels and speakers and the reach that we have for certain topics works really well. So this is why we're together for the mental health session. I have personal experience with anxiety. I was just saying before to the panel members that it does seem to be one of my default emotions. A lot is as directly as the result of being a parent to a visually impaired child who also has some quite considerable neurological conditions, and the worries about the unknown, and the worries about perhaps, her safety will always be in somebody else's hands. She's never going to be in a position to comprehend that level of safety. So these all kinds of, she's 12 now, so I've still got quite a long way away, but that's kind of where my anxiety in relation to my own daughter focuses around. So yes. Hi everyone.
Thank you, Charlotte. I also wanted to say, for people that don't know, we run a monthly online peer support group. I'm a parent carer of a visually impaired and deaf child, so everyone is welcome to that if you haven't accessed it before. And yeah, we have these online sessions, which we feel is really important because and they're always topics that our steering group has suggested. So now we're going to go on to our amazing panel members. So thank you all for giving up your time tonight. And the first person who is going to share with us is Shelley Peddy. So welcome, Shelley.
Hello everyone. So as Jane said, I'm Shelley and I'm a qualified counsellor working with children, young people and adults, supporting people with a variety of different issues that they'd like to work through. And today I'll be talking to you about anxiety. So I've prepared a PowerPoint presentation just so that you've got something there to refer to, so that it's there in the video, but also so you can follow rather than listening to me droning on for the whole time. So if you just give me a couple of seconds to share my screen, then I can get this on for you. So this is my business, Shelley Peddy Counselling. So here's my logo to start. So the first topic really is, what is anxiety? And I'm sure you're looking at my slide thinking, why is there a fire engine? Does she have this weird obsession with fireman sound? But actually, it's a really good analogy for explaining anxiety. So for example, you might be at home, there may be a fire, and your first thought would be, I'm going to call the emergency services. So you'd pick up the phone, call 999, a fire engine would come, they'd put the fire out for you. And that's exactly what happens in our brain. So our brain understands that we're in danger. It releases adrenaline into our body because we're in danger. So it's trying to keep ourselves safe, on high alert, so we can protect ourselves. And like that fire engine, in the future, you might then smell smoke and think, there's a fire, I need to call the fire brigade. And it might be a false alarm, but you're on such high alert that you're forever calling the fire brigade. And that's exactly what your brain does when it's experiencing anxiety. So you might have, for whatever reason, had a traumatic experience or a stressful time. And whenever you might be triggered by that, that's where you then go into that fight or flight, where your adrenaline's released and you're feeling anxiety. Hence the fire engine analogy. So I always think that's a helpful way to explain it. And it's quite a helpful way to explain it to children as well, of that's what it is that they're experiencing. And it's a completely normal response. So now I'm going to cover a definition of anxiety from Anxiety UK. So like I've explained quite similarly, but in a different way, it says anxiety is typically described as a feeling of apprehension or dread in situations where there's no actual real threat, and is disproportionate to the situation faced. Unlike stress, anxiety persists even after a concern has passed. And here we have different types of anxiety. So I think these are helpful for looking at for ourselves and also for our children, so we can recognize those signs, not just in our own behavior, but also in our children. And I find I suffer with anxiety myself, and I kind of refer to this as a bit of like a bingo, because I feel I've hit a lot of a full house in these sometimes. So the physical symptoms are butterflies in the stomach, shortness of breath, headaches or dizziness, hot flushes, increased heartbeat, increased perspiration, a dry mouth, a tight band across your chest area, wanting to use the toilet more often, feeling sick and shaking, loss and or gain of appetite. And I find that can fluctuate. For one day you might feel anxious and you don't want to eat, and another day you might be really hungry and you can't satisfy your appetite and you're almost eating your feelings. And then a choking sensation and or palpitations, which is usually when anxiety can be quite severe, that you almost feel like you can't swallow the saliva in your mouth, so hence the choking sensation. And then we've got the psychological symptoms, which is feeling on edge, feeling frightened and panicky, fearing that you might go mad or lose control, fearing that you might faint, be sick or embarrass yourself, feeling generally that things are speeding up, feeling detached from your environment and the people in it, feeling like wanting to run away, racing thoughts, and the inability to concentrate. And that inability to concentrate is one of the main symptoms of anxiety. So it might be, for example, you can't enjoy your normal day-to-day activities that you might normally enjoy, reading a magazine or watching TV, and you can't seem to focus. And that will be because your anxiety is just bubbling away in the background and distracting you from being able to relax. And then we have behavioural symptoms. So these might be things that we recognise again in ourselves, but also with our children. So making excuses to avoid going out with friends, rushing out of situations where you feel anxious, crossing the street to avoid people, under and or overeating again due to the changes in appetite, avoiding going out alone and always taking someone with you. And why is it that we have anxiety? And that is normally stemmed from a trauma of some sort. So I think sometimes traumas can be seen as where I might say to a client, for example, you've experienced a trauma, and people might say, well, I haven't, because people think of it as a huge life-changing event like a car crash or watching a horrific crime or something like that. But actually, trauma is anything that has affected you deeply. It doesn't have to be the things that you might see on EastEnders, for example, or anything like that. It can be things that are a lot less severe than what you see on those sorts of soaps. And actually, I think that sight loss is a trauma in itself. It's a loss of your sight. There's the unknown, it's scary. And that is all linked to trauma. So here I've got, again, some definitions of trauma. So the Oxford Dictionary says it's a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. And Mind UK say that it's going through a very stressful and or frightening event, which I think we can all relate to as being a parent, carer of a child with a visual impairment. And I can say for myself, having a son with a visual impairment, it is incredibly frightening. And, you know, that's without our children that are experiencing themselves. It's a lot more frightening for them. So here we have some trauma responses, which again, when we have anxiety, is quite often how we react when we're feeling anxious. So there's the fight, which is physically fighting, lashing out, pushing. They're all things that we might recognize in our children, that when they're anxious, they might lash out, whether that's verbally, physically, however it is that they feel the need to express that. And then there's flight, so putting distance between yourself and danger, which can include running, hiding, backing away. And then there's freeze, so going tense, still, or silent. And that's something that my son does a lot, actually. He will just completely withdraw. So he will completely remove himself emotionally from a situation. And that's how I know quite often that he's suffering from anxiety. So here we have anxiety, things to remember. So here there's immediate support. So quite often when you're having an anxiety attack or a panic attack, you can feel really out of control. So it's really difficult in that moment to think, what can I do to stop this? You can't whip out a self-help book or necessarily make a phone call, because your mind isn't in that place to be able to go and do things like that. So here I've got two things that I think are really helpful for when you're in that moment of experiencing anxiety. So there's the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 coping strategy, which is where, for example, your child is suffering with anxiety or yourself, you can try and stop in that moment and think, what are 5 things I can see? So you'd look around your environment. And for me right now, I can see all of you lovely people on this call. I can see our panel members. There's a light switch in the background. I have a drinks bottle in front of me. I've got a notepad and I've got a pen. So they're my 5 things. 4 things you can touch. So I could touch my computer screen, my chair, my table. I could touch the floor. 3 things you can hear. So right now I can hear my own voice. I can hear the sound of somebody's computer in the background sort of making a noise. And I can hear some birds outside. 2 things you can smell. That's quite difficult for me right now. I'm not really smelling anything, but if you're in an environment where you're outside, you might be able to smell the grass, for example, or smell even the perfume on your clothes, you might be able to smell. And then 1 thing you can taste. So if you're really needing to ground yourself, that could be a time where you might carry some mints with you, or a chocolate button. You could just pop it in your mouth and concentrate on that taste to kind of try and ground you and bring you back out of that panic attack. There's also the 5-5-5 breathing technique. So that's breathing in through your nose for 5 seconds, holding it for 5 seconds, and then breathing out through your mouth for the count of 5. And that can be quite difficult to start, especially if you're hyperventilating as a result of a panic attack. But it's just concentrating on that breathing. And even if it takes a good few attempts to get to that stage where you can follow that breathing technique through, it just helps to control your breathing, helps to slow everything down, and again, ground you out of that panic attack. And then here I have tips for parents, which I think it's, as a lot of these questions were that came through prior to this Zoom call now, lots of them were focused on our children, and I completely understand that. But there's a phrase that I've always learned throughout my training, but also as a parent carer, about not being able to pour from an empty cup. And I think that's completely true, that if we're not looking after ourselves and we're reaching burnout point, we have nothing to put in towards supporting our children. And we naturally want the best that we possibly can for our children. So it's almost practicing what we preach and showing them that by example of that what we can do to help ourselves when we're feeling anxious. So I've got here some self-care, and as my own experience of a parent carer, I remember people saying this to me all the time, and I thought, do you know I have no time? I'm going to all these hospital appointments, I'm seeing all these professionals, I'm at school doing all of these admin things for my child. I do not have time for self-care. But actually, it could just be 10 minutes if that's what you've got time for. So it could be going for a walk with the dog. It could be reading a book, having a coffee with a friend, running a long bath and having a soak. It's all of those things that we can do just to give ourselves a little bit of time just to unwind and decompress. And then there's asking for help, which can be really difficult to do, but there's no shame in asking for help. So that could be speaking to a friend again, speaking to a teacher, reaching out to somebody from one of the brilliant charities we have here tonight and just saying, I really need some help. And or even coming to a counsellor, going to anything that you need, a parent support group, and just reaching out to other people, because there's lots of people that do want to help, but if you don't ask, they don't know. And then again, there's medication. And I think sometimes there can be a bit of a taboo around medication, but I think if you had a headache, you would take an ibuprofen or a paracetamol to help numb that pain. And it's exactly the same in this. If you need something to take the edge off, it's a painkiller. And I think, you know, there's nothing wrong in that. And if it helps you to function in day-to-day life, I'm all for it. Then we have You Are Not Alone. And sometimes it really feels like we're alone. But when we reach out to those people around us with our family support networks, if we've got them, we've got our friends, we've got charities and support groups and all different people that we've got around us that we can access for help. And yeah, I think that's, you may feel alone, but actually there's lots of people, maybe even in this chat tonight, that feel alone, but actually we've all come together to learn about something, which shows in ourselves that there's solidarity within this community. And then there's mindfulness, meditation, and positive thinking. So this is one that I think people is quite Marmite. People are like, absolutely not. And other people are all for it. So you can carry out mindfulness in many different ways. So you can do that through journaling, meditation, there's yoga, lots of different things that you can do to practice those things. And also with the positive thinking, it's if you go into something with a positive outlook, you're going to see those positives. If you're going in thinking that everything will be awful, it probably will, because you're looking for those things. Then finally, there's exercise. So exercise is good for your body and mental health. It releases endorphins, that boost your mood and make you feel better. So even though I myself like, absolutely not, I'm not going for a walk, not going for a run, even just doing a little bit will make you feel better. So if you're able to push yourself through to actually carrying out some exercise, that can really help you with your mindset too. Here I've got some written resources. I think sometimes that can be good for people that like to be doing something, have something in front of them. So I've listed 2 books here, one for younger children, one for teenagers. They're available on Amazon, but they are available in places like The Works as well. And they're just practicing mindfulness. So they have different activities on each page for children. You can get larger copies on Amazon as well, so that you can work through those either with your child or they can do them independently. And it just focuses on boosting self-esteem and building resilience. And finally, we've got creating a mental health toolbox. Now, this is something that I do with a lot of younger clients, but it can also be something that we use with adults as well. So I've got an example of this that one of my lovely clients agreed that I could share with you all tonight. So here is our toolbox that we created. So this is Charlie. Charlie is 11 and suffers of anxiety. So we're almost building a toolbox that they can refer to at a time when they're feeling anxious. And we separated it into different parts so that there's school, there's activities you can do, and there's special people. Now, this might not always be easy to implement, especially if you're in a state of panic. You might forget you've got this sheet of paper in your pocket or in your bag, but the more that you start referring to it, the more it becomes a habit and the more it's something that you automatically go to. So here, Charlie's toolbox includes some special people. So we've got Mummy, Nanny, Auntie Rachel, Sophie, Jack, their dog Bailey, and Daddy. So we use those people so that then if Charlie's struggling, they're people that he's likely to talk to if he's feeling that he's having a hard time. And then at school, we've got a list of things that he could do if he was struggling. So talk to a teacher, there's friends, playtime, and a sensory ball that he uses at school when he's struggling. And then for activities, we've got talking, listening to my favourite song, playing Connect 4 with my sister, reading to my dad, colouring, drawing, playing on my Xbox. I've got something in the way, so I'm just going to have to move it out of the way a second. And then having a bath, baking gingerbread men, and cuddling my teddies. So with this, there may be, like all toolboxes, there's a variety of tools in there. If you're trying to put a picture on the wall, if you're using a tape measure to do that, it's not going to work. So it's trial and error of learning what works in different situations. So there might be times where drawing really helps and other times where it doesn't. So it's sort of going through that list to learn what works for you at different points. See if I can move on to the next page. So here is some pictures of me and my family, because I've spoken as a counsellor, so now it's talking as a parent carer. So here are my children, Max, my youngest, and Dexter, my eldest. Max has visual impairment, and we also have our buddy dog, Duncan, who has done wonders for working with the anxiety of not just Max, but also my son Dexter and me as well. We all suffer from anxiety in different ways. So Max will suffer with anxiety because he's struggling at school. There might be challenges of the loss of his eyesight, coming to terms with that, realizing that he's different from his peers and he's in a mainstream school and he sometimes struggles with that. Dexter suffers from anxiety because as the sibling of a child with a visual impairment, he takes on a lot of responsibility for his brother, tries to support me and worries about his brother when he's at school. So when he's at school and I'm not there, he almost takes on that parental role as much as I try and tell him he doesn't need to do that. So he'll be worrying of what happens at playtime if he's hurt. I need to make sure that I'm looking after him. So it's managing Dexter's anxiety as well as Max's. And then there's me. And although I'm a counsellor, I also suffer with anxiety. And that was present, to be honest, before I had my children, but it has become greater since having them. And that's the fear of the future of what Max's sight loss entails for him, but also us as a family. So I think it's important to recognise that anxiety doesn't just sit with the child who has the disability, the child with the sight loss, it affects the whole family. So I think that's really important that we all look after each other and support each other. So yeah, that's my presentation. That's me. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Shelley. That was so informative and brilliant. There might well be questions for you, but we're going to listen to Sid now and then kind of get questions for both of you afterwards. But it resonated what you said so much with me as well, Shelley. And yeah, kind of trying to support my daughter with her anxiety and her rigidity, which I know is when she's really worried about things, and then kind of helping her to kind of be able to deal with things. And then, yeah, managing my own when I'm feeling concerned for her. So it's really great to have those tips from you as well. Thank you. Sydney.
Hello. You said that in a very menacing way, Jane.
Sorry, I thought about saying Sid and I thought, no, I'll use her whole name.
Thank you.
I didn't mean to say it in a sinister way. So Sid and I work with each other, but she also works at Thomas Attori at Blatchington Court Trust and as a practitioner in your own right. So you can introduce yourself, Sid.
Thank you, Jane. If there's anyone here who's been to one of Jane's parent support groups before, you might know who I am. But yeah, as Jane said, I work for Look, and I also work for another local charity down in Brighton where I am. And I also work privately as a life coach and mindset coach. I'm also visually impaired myself. Well, severely sight impaired. I have no sight at all. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about my experience of anxiety and my kind of top tips and tricks from what I've learned from personally going through it myself, and also what I've learned from being a coach. So my experience of it kind of started as a teenager, as it very often does. And my original experience of it was very physical. A lot of the things that Shelley talked about at the beginning of those physical symptoms, the butterflies in the stomach, the kind of, well, it went beyond butterflies. I think I was nauseous a lot of the time. And I feel like, even though I'm not that old, my teenage anxiety started maybe 15, 16 years ago. And even in that time, if you think back that far, we didn't talk about anxiety in the same way that we do now. It wasn't really on our radar as much. Well, it certainly wasn't on my parents' radar as much. And at first, I was kind of going through a lot of physical symptoms, and the first thing to do was to get that physically kind of checked out, go to the doctors, be like, I feel sick all the time, kind of what's wrong. And I feel like my memory is maybe not that clear on this, but I think that went on for quite a while before it was recognized as anxiety. And then, as Shelley described, I did have a kind of trauma in that I got on a train to go to a friend's house when I really shouldn't have done, because I was ill. I was physically ill. I had to go and be sick, and I shouldn't have traveled on the train. And obviously the motion of the train just made it all a lot worse. From that point on, I had panic attacks and nausea getting on a train. And it was my brain making this stupid association with, last time you were on a train, you were sick. So I'm going to make you feel sick every time you get on a train. And that took really quite a long time to beat completely. And really my way of beating it was just to keep getting on the train and keep proving to myself that one time I was physically ill, I can do this. And my attitude was quite a stubborn one, really, because I thought, I can't see, I can't drive. I really need to be able to get the train and to be able to use public transport. I can't let this stop me. I can't let this beat me. And so it was pretty much persistence that got me through that, continuing to get on the train, continuing to feel really awful when I was getting on the train, and pushing past that until I could teach my brain that actually this is in my head. And it was actually a hypnotherapist that my mum took me to who explained that to me, and explained that it was an association, and made that clear to me. And once I knew that that was what was happening, it made it much easier to cope with. So I think learning about what this is, as we've been doing here, learning about why anxiety happens, for me, that was really, really helpful to kind of say, okay, this is why this is happening. Because when you don't know why it's happening, it's really scary to keep doing something that's making you feel all these physical symptoms. And then you kind of I certainly ended up in that trap of panicking about panicking and feeling awful and thinking, what am I going to do if I get on the train and I feel sick? To the point that for quite a long time, I always traveled with a plastic bag in my coat pocket. Never needed it, but always had it. And I think it took me several years to finally ditch the plastic bag. And that was my safety mechanism. And I think if you or your child needs something like that you know they're never going to use, but it makes them feel better for having it, then that's okay. You know, that's really okay. I remember finding an old leather jacket when I was about 24 that I hadn't used for a couple of years, and it had a plastic bag in the pocket, and I thought, oh yeah, that takes me back. But I feel like that's okay. Anything like that makes you feel safe, that takes away that kind of panicking about panicking, I think that's a really positive thing, because that's the worst kind of vicious cycle to fall into, is that panicking about panicking. So yeah, like I say, that I pushed through that particular anxiety, but I definitely still had certain anxieties. I went through quite a rough time when I was about 16, 17. And as Shelley kind of mentioned, I was quite against the idea of medication. Eventually did go on some antidepressant medication because I was really struggling with depression, anxiety, and it was all kind of coming to a head. I was the opposite of a comfort eater, so I was very underweight when I was 16. And so, yeah, medication really was a big thing that pulled me out of that pit. And I've worked with a lot of people who are very against it. And I say exactly what Shelley said, in that, you know, you would take a paracetamol for a headache. There's absolutely no shame. There should be no stigma about taking medication when it comes to an anxiety or depression, or just to help pull you out of whatever funk that you're in. You know, I think there's no shame in you needing it, and there's no shame if your child needs it, you know, if and when they do. So yeah, that was kind of my teenage years. So that gave me an interest really in, I started reading about why things were happening to me. I developed an interest in NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, which is eventually what I trained in. So I trained in NLP and coaching, and that's really helped me to kind of hone in what I do and hone in how I help myself as well as helping other people. These days, most people say I'm the most laid back person you'll ever meet. Anxiety doesn't really feature for me unless things are really bad. I went through a breakup a few years ago and was house hunting at the worst possible time in Brighton in the summer when everyone's house hunting. And that was possibly the most stressful thing I've been through in my 20s, and I lost 1 stone in a month. My mum told me I'd never looked better. I was like, thanks, Mum. I've never felt worse. But, you know, swings and roundabouts. So yeah, I'm not superhuman. I still would get anxious about certain things, but these days it takes a lot. So I want to share with you some of the things that help me and some of the things that I use to help my clients. I want to give you a couple of book recommendations, and I'll make sure that these are written down. I know Jane's going to send out some resources for people. Now, a big book recommendation for me is The Power of Now. It's Eckhart Tolle. It's very famous. Yeah, The Power of Now. And it talks all about how anxiety is rooted. Yeah, thank you. Anxiety is rooted in the past or the future. So as Shelley described as well, there'll be a trauma that happens that starts off that anxiety. So if we take that trauma out of the picture, if we take that out of our minds, then in theory, the thing that started the anxiety is gone. And also a lot of anxiety is rooted in the future. And I'm sure as parents, you worry about your child's future. And we all do it. We worry about things that will happen in the future. But if we take that out, and if we are simply in the present, and again, this is basically what mindfulness is. And if we're in the present moment, we take away the past, we take away the future, there is almost nothing that we can be anxious about. It's pretty impossible to be anxious. You might be sitting here, wherever you're sitting right now, and there might be lots of things that can make you anxious if you think about tomorrow, next year, whatever. But if you take all of that away right now, just think about what you're doing right now. Hopefully you're sitting comfortably. There's nothing around you right now that's making you anxious. If the house is on fire, yeah, deal with that. But hopefully there's nothing right now that's causing you anxiety. And that's what this book is all about, is just focusing on the right now. There's nothing to be anxious about. And that was a massive thing for me when dealing with my flying phobia. I had a massive phobia of flying. And then I realized, of course, I didn't have a phobia of flying. I had a phobia of what might happen. I had a phobia of dying in a fiery plane crash, not actually what is happening right now. And every time I just brought my focus back to the right now, it's fine. Nothing bad's happening. So yeah, that's one of my book recommendations. Another one, far less well known. There's a coach. There's another Sydney. It's Sydney with an I because he's a male Sydney. Sydney Banks. He was a coach. He was around from the 70s. He's sadly not with us anymore. He wrote a few books. There's one in particular called The Enlightened Gardener. Weird title, I know. And Sydney Banks teaches us all about the power of thought and all about how we can choose how we think about anything in life and how our experience is coming from the inside out, not the outside in. I promise it's quite a short book and it's quite an easy read. It's not as heavy as I'm making it sound. But the concept of our experience coming from inside us and not outside of us, I think is really important, because it means it's not actually things outside of us that make us anxious. There's no such thing as one thing that makes everybody anxious. You know, some people will find a massage, for example, really relaxing and lovely, and some people will be really anxious about someone massaging their body. Someone who feels self-conscious wouldn't find that a relaxing experience. And so there is no such thing as one thing that makes us all anxious. It is how we think about it. And again, this is how I got through my flying phobia, was I realized that how I was thinking didn't make a difference to whether I was flying safely or not, all it did was affect my experience of that. And that was what actually helped me completely change and not have that phobia anymore. And I really have beaten that phobia, which I never, ever thought I would. And weirdly, I had that realization before I heard of Sydney Banks, and he had a very similar realization. So yeah, he's a fascinating guy. You can look at him talking on YouTube, and he's just a calming person to listen to. So yeah, The Enlightened Gardener, I can see Charlotte's posting links in the chat. So yeah, please do get those, and I'll make sure they go out with the resources as well. So I think as a parent, for you guys, one of the most important things for me as a young person with anxiety was thinking that the people around me understood, and just having that support network and knowing that I wasn't going to get told off for being anxious. I think that's a really important one. My mum, for all her wonderful qualities, and you may have heard me talk about her before, if you've heard me talk, you know, my mum has done an awful lot for me. The one thing, and she will readily admit this, the one thing that might be her downfall is slight impatience. And she was actually surprisingly very good with my anxiety. And I think maybe as much as you might want to be kind of like, oh, come on, snap out of it. Having some understanding and being there for somebody, if they're particularly in the moment of a panic attack, it's really, sometimes you can know all of these things inside, and having someone on the outside helping you calm down, doing for me, the counting of the breathing, which Shelley mentioned, that was really helpful for me. Because occasionally I would go into the full hyperventilation panic attack. So I think, yeah, being there and knowing that it's okay. And again, that takes away that panicking about panicking. If you know that if you do panic, it's all right, and your mum's not gonna beat you up about it. Not literally, obviously. So yeah, that's a massive thing. There was something else I was going to say, and it's gone out of my head. This is why I shouldn't wing it, and right notes.
Well, you've been winging it very well, Sid. do you want me to see if there's any questions, and you can have a think about your last
I'm happy for
bit.
anyone to throw questions. There's something right on the tip of my tongue that I was going to say, and it's eluded me right now. Yeah, I don't think there's been any questions in the chat.
No,
right
there
now.
Hasn't. And
Fine.
also for Shelley as well, because Shelley shared some really great stuff earlier. That's fine. There's no obligations. That, like I said, we've built in some times, but if you do think of things, because quite often we'll move on and then you might think of something, please feel free to use the chat, because you know we want you to be able to interact and feel comfortable.
Can I just finish with my shameless self-promotion if anybody wants to? I do tend to share tips, sort of my top tips, and I have a coaching social media. You can find me at Sid May Coach, so SYDMAY COACH. I'm most active on Instagram, and I tend to share videos of tips and tricks and things that are most helpful. So if you wish to follow that, please do.
That's good, and we'll put that in the resources as well. Thank you very much, Sid. Everyone's very quiet, absorbing the information.
I hope you're all still awake.
Well, we can't tell, but the people with their cameras on are. So now we go on to hearing some more lived experience. Anna Marie, do you want to ask a question? No, that's fine.
I'm just letting you know we're still here.
You're a star. Thank you. So now we're going to hear from some young people with lived experience. So the first is Grace, who's a Victor ambassador. Grace, you are very young to me, in my late 40s. Are you ready to share your experiences? There you go. So you've got to start.
Hello.
Hi, Grace. Brilliant. Hi. There you are.
Can you see me okay?
We can, but you know, your words are the most important thing. You are in the dark a bit now. Oh, but we don't mind. We don't mind. We just want to hear from you. That's the most important thing. So are you happy to introduce yourself, Grace?
Yep.
Brilliant.
So, hi everybody. Thank you all for coming tonight. As Jane has just said, I am a Victor Young Ambassador. I'm 23, I'm blind, and I live in Suffolk, and I have a lived experience of anxiety. It's a topic that is extremely close to my heart, and that's why I wanted to help with this workshop and the work that Victor and Look are doing together on anxiety. And I think that's one thing I really wanted to start with, is that you and your young people are absolutely, although it might seem like you are in the moment, you are absolutely not alone in this at all. When I got the questions, when the questions and the themes came in ahead of this workshop, there were two massive themes that I picked up, which were anxiety around the future for both the parent and the young person, anxiety around growing up, and also anxiety for both around the young person admitting or maybe being able to recognize or communicate or gauge when they need help with what's causing the anxiety in the first place. I think for me, those are both themes that I relate to massively. And particularly, it's only really been the last year that I've massively been able to come to terms with them, because you've got, I know there was a question that I particularly related to one of the questions that came in ahead of the workshop about growing up with a vision impairment and other diagnoses, maybe neurodiversity, neurodevelopmental or whatever. Because while I'm not diagnosed with one of these disorders or conditions, I do have maybe personality traits, behaviours, ways of thinking that might come off a little bit unusual to my peers or to people around me who don't know me. And I think a lot of that is born out, a lot of anxiety around that is born out of anxiety, is born out of insecurity, and how also the betrayal of how I have seen disability as betrayed in the media and in society and even in real life to an extent, really has kind of made me, I've kind of looked at myself and gone, should I really be doing that? Am I too old? Am I too young? Is it my disability? Is it my personality? Do people really want to hear about that stuff again and again and again, even though it makes me happy, or it's something that I care about? And I think on top of that, there's also a real line to toe, in so much as, particularly if you understand your disability or disability in general, you know you're different and you want to embrace and accept that, but you also want to grow up as a so-called, and I'm absolutely loath to use the word, but normal person. And I think for me that's hit in that, like I'm sure many young people will go through. I do have goals, but I am very clear about how I want to achieve those goals. And I've kind of also, as I say, about the portrayal of like, disability in real life and in the media, I have seen what I would fear as my worst case scenario if I don't keep striving towards what I envisage for myself, what I know I'm capable of. And I think over the last couple of years, I struggled to admit and communicate those anxieties. And because of that, I would become quite irrational and say things probably specifically about disability, vision impairment. I became very focused on it, and it really went against what I was saying, went against everything I believed. That actually what I didn't want to admit was, okay, I want this life, but I'm really scared of the high level of support that could come with it, when actually I know the people I trust and the level of support that I want as I get older. Will that always be possible? Or will I need a higher level that absolutely terrifies me and makes me feel like I'm weak? And it's like, oh my God, that's not me at all. And then over the last year or so, I've kind of found things, and I'm sure your young people, some of your young people may have found similar things that I've just found so relatable, that safer ways of communicating the anxiety and saying, actually, I am different. I still want to grow up. I still have to grow up, even though I'm 20, nearly 24, but I am different. And actually, I need to be able to embrace that difference. And now I see that actually those differences, that I walk into a room and maybe worry that those things look obvious, they look unusual, they look annoying. Actually, they are the differences that have the potential and the power to get me to where I want to be in life. And that's kind of what I've been working on over the last year, is communicating safely my anxiety and having the courage to say, actually, I can't do this on my own. I need help. I want help because I want to be better. And this help maybe works for me. This help doesn't. So also finding the courage to politely say, yes, that really works. Thank you. That meant a lot. Or no, that really doesn't work. If we have to do it, that's okay. But please, can we, as you know, as a long-term thing, if we can, avoid it and use the things that do work for my personality, maybe just not, and what I'm used to, maybe just not just calming my disability down almost. So So the other thing I wanted to share was how I manage those anxieties, because I also have anxiety around getting ready to go out, managing my disability outside of the comfort of the home where I have everything I need and I can manage it discreetly and independently. So I manage everything pretty much through creativity, the creative arts, writing, singing, music. I've always been very creative, but it's only the last year that I've really looked at it and gone, actually, this is really, really therapeutic. This really allows me to get things out without them consuming every part of my brain and every part of the brains and lives of the people who support me, because it's out on paper or it's out in music, it's out safely. So I devote time every week wherever I can just to kind of take everything in around me, and then just devote time every week to sit and put it into poetry or lyrics, or make sure to sing every day, or something that lets me get things out. I also find linked to that I will take myself away from any situation that I find difficult or could potentially trigger my anxiety, or that I might wonder why I'm not coping so well in that situation. I will deal with that by dancing very badly, I might add. But I do have aspects in that field. And for me, this has an added level of thank you, Charlotte. It does have an added layer of creativity that I haven't found in other types of movement, like sport or even walking, as much as nice as walking is, because it's just you and the music. There's no desire to, if you want to do it competitively, brilliant, good on you, very, very admirable. But it's just you and the song in the moment. There's no desire, unless you want to be the best or win, or there's no skill. You could even dance laying on the floor if you're so, somebody is so badly disabled that they can't get off the floor. You could even dance by kicking your legs. It's such an inclusive form of movement. The other thing that really helps me is to listen to music. So as well as making music. So wherever I am, whenever I can, I will have music on nearly all the time. And when I'm getting ready to go out, I will have music on, and turning it off will be the last thing that I do before I go and get ready. And for me, that is the process of shutting that music off is the ultimate signal of, okay, you've made it and nothing's went wrong. So you can relax a little, even though you might still be feeling nervous. You can relax a little. And I remember when I used to go out in the mornings sometimes, because mornings were the hardest time for me. Leaving, we used to have music left on for our dog while we were out in the house. And if that music was on, even if my music was off, if I focused fully on that music while I was waiting to leave the house, I'd be fine. But as soon as I focused off that, it was like, just focus. Whatever you do, just focus on the music rather than worrying about getting ready. Kind of think through, like, oh, this is playing and this is playing, and actually, the best piece of advice I have ever been given for my anxiety in terms of music was around 5 years ago now, when things hit quite a high level because I just left sixth form and my physical symptoms of anxiety went a bit higher. And it was my mum that gave me the piece of advice, because for nearly all my life I've loved Kiss FM, and it's Kiss FM that's really helped me with my mental health. And my mum said to me, whenever you feel a bit anxious, turn Kiss up. And it was that having Kiss there, but also, and I know Shelley talked about grounding, the process, the physical rhythm of pressing the button to turn Kiss up, to make it louder, was really calming. And that since then, so when I sort of came out of that bad patch, I used to, when we were getting ready, used to have Kiss really blasting that summer, so everybody in the neighbourhood could probably hear it. One other thing that really helps me is that I am incredibly lucky over, it's been slow, but as again, particularly over the last year, I am incredibly lucky to have family, friends, and a support worker who know me extremely well, who almost will anticipate situations that are going to set it off and will act just off the back of it. For example, by randomly bursting into song and singing one of my favourite songs just because they know it will make me laugh when I'm feeling a bit socially awkward. And that, to me, just really helps, because it's discreet, but it just shows that they've actually taken the time to get to know me rather than just the disability. You know, to think, oh, she likes that song, One Kiss or whatever. It's, you know, just to sing, to do things that make you smile and make you feel good. But unfortunately, I know I'm incredibly lucky in that respect, because not everybody has that. And I would say, you know, you are in a position of trust with your young person. They consider you a safe person who they can go to. So my advice there would be to encourage them to nurture that, to find someone they trust in situations where they might potentially feel triggered, and find a way, whether that's writing or or a flick of the wrist or whatever, or some might even be confident enough just to literally stand up and go, do you know what, I'm not okay. And that's okay. You have to kind of go with that and encourage them to find that way of communicating before it boils over, and direct it away. Think about healthy things that will help them? Is there a favourite song? Do you notice that they play a particular song to calm down when they're anxious? Is there an interest, music, drawing, football? Is there something that they like to talk about? Pay attention to those healthy little things, because they could be what saves their mental health and gives them their future. And also, finally, I would say there's something you can have called a transitional object or a focus aid. And a transitional object is something that you would have with you that reminds you of someone who is special to you when they're not there. So it could be a piece of jewelry, could be a photograph, which I don't know how helpful that would be to someone with a vision impairment, but it could be. Even just holding the photograph, not necessarily being able to see it, that could be enough to trigger reassurance. It's something that reminds you that that person might come back, and even if they can't, they will be with you in any special memories that you might share together. And a focus aid is kind of something like, I don't know, like an elastic band that you might wear on your wrist and play with, or a fidget spinner, or I know Shelley referred to a sensory ball, stress ball, something like that. And these can be interchangeable. So you might have, say, they might have, say, a fidget spinner that was bought for them by their best friend, which has both the memories and the effect of grounding them back to where they want to be. So I really hope you found this helpful, and that you've learned some stuff from me, and that you've take from it that you're not alone. It is a fight, but if we all fight through it together, then we can get through. We might not necessarily win the fight every day, but we can get through it. It is a journey, has up and down bits, but you get there.
Thank you, Grace. That was just full of wisdom and honesty. And I have look at having a kind of a festival in July, and I now really want to have a silent disco with the other parents, so that we can all disappear into music, and dance like nobody's watching, and get rid of some stress, because I think those ideas you've got are the most wonderful things. I know that for my daughter, when she was really struggling in school, she had a transitional object. She had like a little smooth stone that was the thing she could hold when she was getting worried in classes, and just really brilliant. Thank you so much, Grace. You are an utter star. You've had a message from Charlotte. Thank you for sharing so openly, and all the offer of practical solutions. And Malef has said, thank you, Grace, very helpful. So to think about with son leaving the house. So we will take it forward, and I have lots of hope that the parents here are here because they want to come and listen and make a difference and work with their children. It's just brilliant. So thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
That's fine. And we're going to hear from a couple of mentors and have questions if there's time. But I think you will also summarise it and send all this information and advice on to the parents afterwards. So you're a star. Thank you. So now it's time for our Look mentor, Sarah. So Sarah, are you there? I know you are, but can you turn your camera on for us? There you are. Hi, Sarah. Hi. You were, I think, one of Sid's mentors. Is that right?
I was when I was Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. So you've got some of your own personal experience to share.
Yeah. So I'll just introduce myself first. So I'm Sarah. I'm also a mentor. And yeah, I was Sid's mentee, and it was a great partnership while I was at, I think, the first 2 years of university. So as we were going into lockdown, which was a very interesting time for the world. So yeah, I was her mentee, and I had a positive experience, which made me want to become a mentor, which is what I do now. And the reason I'm here tonight is because I do have my own lived experience as well of anxiety, and I've had ways that I would say that I manage it. So when people say, "Oh, I've overcome anxiety," I haven't figured that one out yet, because I think it's just such a natural response with how things are at the moment, with how we experience our daily lives. So for me, it's been an interesting one, because in hindsight, I would say that my teen years were absolutely riddled with anxiety, and I could actually relate a lot of the questions that came up that we were sent before tonight, because I struggled with friendships, I struggled with life at home, I struggled with socializing, and I would have nights where I'd come home and just cry and cry, and I didn't want to do homework, I didn't want to do anything, because I didn't fit in at school. And it was just such a difficult time, and in that time I also experienced my own traumas. I had some bereavements and other things going on that a lot of my peers just wouldn't have had to deal with, and that was so difficult. But it took a long time to realize that I was struggling with my mental health, and it came up sometimes at school, and teachers noticed it, but I'm just speculating, but I'm not sure they realized to what extent I was actually suffering. And that only came to the forefront when I was at college, and it just spiraled out of control, and I had a very serious mental breakdown, and sort of had to build myself up from there. And it was, part of it was just, I can't get any lower than this, so where do I go? And it was only when I left college and started university, and I would actually say when I reached out to have a mentor, that was such a big step for me, because I wasn't quite ready to go to therapy, but I still needed like a critical friend that could just give advice. And a lot of the things I spoke about were more to do with like my course, university life. I never discussed anything, my anxiety, I don't think, maybe at the start, to do with socializing with friends. And then my life just turned around, because I was doing a music degree. Suddenly I'm surrounded by all these musicians, and I ended up having the best years of my life, those 3 years, even though we ended up in lockdown. And I made friends, and that was such an amazing experience. And I still keep these friendships, and I still have this amazing support network that I've built up in the last 4 years. I also have a guide dog. I had a guide dog at college, but she was withdrawn, but I now have my second guide dog, Carly, and she's given me like so much joy and happiness. And it's that companionship as well that I think has helped with my anxiety. And so really that's kind of what I've been through, that's allowed me to have a lot of empathy for people that are going through struggles. So I guess when it comes to giving advice and tips, the biggest one for me is educate yourself on what anxiety is. So I think like the people that have presented before me have had a lot to say on that, and given some great suggestions on where to start, because education is key to understanding and informing how we help others, and that can be yourself, that can be your children, because words mean a lot to people that are struggling, actions as well. And sometimes if we say something or do something in the hopes of being helpful, you might learn something like, oh wow, that wasn't helpful. And you know, being ignorant to someone's mental health can really be quite detrimental. So I think educating yourself on what anxiety is, on what trauma responses are, on how people act in different situations, and how it might not align with perhaps like your logical view, that can really make a difference to yourself and the people around you, because I think it allows for a lot more compassion and acceptance. And in my journey, having a lot more compassion for myself has allowed me to be more present for others. So yeah, I'd really suggest that. And also echoing what's sort of already been said about self-care. We might think we've not got the time to take care of ourselves, but we do, because we can just incorporate it into the way we live our lives. So something I do is like, well, I know I have to shower, like that's essential. So I buy my favorite shower gels. So when I have a shower, I'm like, I smell amazing and I love it. And you know, the clothes I buy, I like, you know, so and also allowing yourself to have your favorite snack every once in a while, and just the little things and that you can do to help take care of yourself, because if you take care of yourself, it's more manageable to look after everyone else around you. So yeah, that can be really helpful. Another thing I think is like lifestyle. That's been a major thing. And as a teenager, like I hated sport. I hated exercise. I thought it was boring. It's the worst thing ever. Hated PE. But now I'm a very active person. I still don't think I'd enjoy a PE lesson though if someone offered that to me. But I run. I've started climbing. So just experimenting with different forms of exercise can really help. And if you encourage your child to join in, they might find something that suits them as well. But you know, and that kind of leads to like the last thing that I have to say, which is just remember that you're important. You're important, your child's important, and you are enough, because it's so easy to think about how we haven't done this for ourselves or our child, or I'm not good enough. But really, you can only be as good as you are in the moment, and that's enough. And you might think, oh, well, I've learnt something new, and if I applied that last week, it would have gone much better. Well, you can't change. So focus on just being yourself and offering yourself some kindness and some compassion, and the same for your child or whoever it is, you know, suffering with anxiety. Because I think if we know that we're loved and that we're supported, even though there might be some frustration because we're not doing exactly what we should be doing, and you know, you might make a suggestion and your child just goes, no, I'm not doing that. And that can be quite frustrating, especially if it's coming from a place where you just want them to have the best and you just think that it would help if you just have some compassion and understand that these things take time. As I mentioned at the start, like, it's taken me about 7 years to realize that I need to do something about how anxious I feel, and I need to go to therapy, and I need to ask for help and build up a support network. And sometimes it just comes with growing up, meeting people that are a little bit more mature and more understanding of disability or just the situation we're in. And, you know, teenagers don't always get it. So as the parent, you can be there for your child and just remind them that it's okay, and that their experience might be what they're experiencing now, but it'll get better. And, you know, when they go to college, they'll have a different social group, so they might make better friends. And then again, if they decide to go to uni or in work, and, you know, we're surrounded by a lot of people that will give their time, and they're the ones that we need to focus on. And yeah, so just be like compassionate in the moment and remind yourself that the situation can change, but it might not be right now, which, you know, is what we all wish we could have. I think just keeping that expectation and those goals realistic, it just helps to sort of lift the burden a bit and take the blame off yourself, if you know. And yeah, just yeah, be kind to yourself. Yeah, and I think that's everything I've got to say.
Thank you. Sorry, Sarah, I interrupted you before you quite finished. I do apologise.
Oh no, I just said that I hope it's helpful.
I think it definitely was helpful. Just so you know that your guide dog wanted to join in, so we could see your guide dog behind you. Yeah, it's just lovely to hear from you. Yeah, it's just lived experience is really, really helpful. And I think you're right, it all takes time, and the number one thing we can be is kind to ourselves and kind to our children, and take each day as they come. But yeah, you're absolutely fantastic. And I love the fact that music has come up for you and Grace. So finding the thing that makes you happy and escape feels really important, and it's the same for Sydney as well. So because I know Sid is massive, she's very musical and is in a band. So now, just so everyone knows, our panelists have so much to say that I don't think that we're going to have hardly any time for questions, but I know that you could comment if need be. So I'm going to ask now our last Emma, who is another Look mentor, to speak, and then we'll hear from Nicola from the RSBC. Emma, are you here? Yes, there you are.
Hello. So
Hi.
hi everyone, I'm Emma. I'm a Look mentor. I'm 32. I also work as a spa therapist. I am completely blind. I lost my sight 4 years ago, and yeah, that's when my anxiety started. When I first went blind, I was so anxious I didn't even want to leave my hospital room. I would have panic attacks just when the doctors would tell me like what happened to me and what the plans would be going forward. Yeah, I was quite anxious then, and to help me again, I gotta go back to the music to help me get out, out of the hospital and make me less anxious. They would play my favorite music, so just on the nurse's phone, and she would play it on the phone, and yeah, that would help me get out and about, and yeah, would take away the sort of the feeling of doom whenever I'd leave the hospital. So yeah, that got me through that, and then when I came home, the anxiety was still there. It was the anxiety of oh, how am I going to live now? I'm in the blind world. How am I going to like socialize? How am I going to get out and be the independent woman that I was before? And yeah, things like that. So yeah, I managed to find clubs which my hospital liaison officer helped me connect with. So I go to a VI drama group where I met all different people going through the same situation as me, which really helped build my confidence. And then also to be able to go out, because I had no idea how I was going to manage to go out. Now I can't see. Like, my mum actually took me to a surfing school, which is actually for people with different disabilities. Yeah, I go there now every Tuesday, and that really helps. So yeah, exercise is what really helps with me. Being in the sea, being in nature, it just really helps calm the mind. And yes, yeah, surfing is really good, soothing the mind. It's also provenly tested that people who do surfing, it actually helps to calm the mind and help with trauma and stuff like that. So that's what really like drew me to it, and yeah, it's really good. It's lots of fun, and then also yeah, again with the exercise, I actually do jiu-jitsu as well. So that's yeah, it's just again what the other guys are saying is to get in the endorphins and make you feel good, and it helps ease the anxiety. And now I still have anxiety, but yeah, when I got to go out and do stuff, it's not there as much, and I will still go back to the music. Like I think Grace was saying, she'll play music before she goes out. I really like to do that. I'll play music whilst I'm waiting for my taxi. Yeah, get in the taxi. And then also, because I am a spa therapist, I do love to have massages regularly when I can, and do the self-care, the usual, have a nice hot bath with salts and like candles. I also like to do meditation, breathing techniques. Yeah, I find all these really do help soothe my anxiety. So yeah, I hope all this does help you, hope it's good information from me. And yeah, just like the guys said, just know you're not alone, and there are other people going through it, and there are ways to cope with it and to beat it. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for listening.
Oh, Emma, what a huge transformation for you as well. Yeah, I think finding things in common, finding the people that understand really does help.
Definitely.
And just so people know, we recently ran a session on positive participation in sport, so that is available to see, because I do think that sport can really help. That however you access it, for our young people to release the endorphins, and there's lots of different clubs and things that so that will be something else I can send on to people. Yeah, do you find the whole surfing thing, was it quite hard initially? Did you have to overcome anxiety just to do it?
So yeah, the first time I went, I was quite anxious. I didn't know what to expect. Like, I've never surfed before in my life, never mind as a blind person. But no, literally as soon as I got there and I got in, they just make you feel like at ease, and doesn't matter that you don't know what you're doing, because I just feel like being in the sea and being in nature just like naturally calms you down anyways. And yeah, they are so welcoming and easy to get along with, all the coaches. So yeah, because that is one thing that I definitely did think about. I was like, because I was quite anxious going, but then I was thinking, oh, am I going to be too anxious to go back? But no, I've been going for 2 years now, and there's no anxiety. There's never a session where I go in and come out and think, oh, I shouldn't have done that. You always go in and you always come out feeling amazing after. Yeah.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. It's just so lovely to hear from the stories, and just as our Look mentors help mentees, and for families that don't know, we have a waiting list, but it is one of the main things Look delivers is our mentoring scheme. It's really, you know, we link these amazing mentors with lived experience with younger VI children, and you know, you share your experiences, don't you? You help them through the things, and yeah, it's quite mutual, I think, in terms of you kind of help people get through difficult experiences, but it's great, you know, to feel like you're helping as well. So yeah, our mentoring is very good. So for families on this call, you know, we will put a link on our website about that as well, from our website about that. So thank you very much, Emma and Grace and Sarah, for sharing your experiences. Also eloquent, but also, you know, very open about how things have been for you. So we've got comments in chat. Just saying very brave, VI drama and surfing sound incredible. So yeah, so people do appreciate your honesty, they really do. So now, as you can see, I'm going to introduce Nicola from the Royal Society for Blind Children, who can introduce herself, but thank you so much for coming and being our kind of partner on this, Nicola. So I shall let you get on with your presentation or your chat.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you. Yeah, I'm Nicola from RSBC, as Jane has said. My role there is the clinical lead for our Families First team, which I'll tell you about as I talk you through my little bit. What I'm planning to do sort of over these next 10-15 minutes is just respond to some of the questions. I know we've not had enough time for questions because we've had hearing wonderful things from everybody who's spoken so far about their experiences. So I'm going to respond to some of the questions that came in before, and then I was just going to sort of try and pull together some of the themes really that have come out of tonight, and then I'll tell you a little bit about our Families First service as well. So I did manage to do a presentation earlier today, which I then couldn't access, but I have pulled something together as I've been listening. So I'm going to share that just so that you're not just seeing my face and there's some information on screen. So I'll share it. Jane, can you just tell me if you can see it when I share it?
Sorry, I'm unmuting myself. Yes, I can see that.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I was jumping in then. Yeah, we can see it great, Sarah.
Thank you. And as I move it along to hang on, if I put from, that's
there
it.
you go.
If I move it along, can you see the first slide now?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So basically we got loads of questions through before the event, so thanks ever so much for putting things through, and I've just tried to respond to grouping. So we had quite a lot of questions obviously about how to support your child when they've got anxiety. So as a parent or carer, how do you support them? So I think we've had some really good ideas tonight, haven't we, from everybody who's spoken about ideas and ways to support. So this is kind of just adding to that as well. So I think one of the things that's like really useful to do is active listening, which I'm sure many of you are practiced in and do all the time really. But I guess I was just trying to define that a bit. So, summarising what your child's saying back to you and paraphrasing, repeating back like specific words. So I'm just thinking of an example. Sometimes what we can do as parents or carers is try and look for solutions. So, if a young person is saying, your child is saying, oh, I feel really anxious. Okay, but think about how brave you are is what we might say, or think about all the things that you've overcome. And actually it can just be really powerful to, you know, repeat that back. So you're feeling really anxious. Can you say a bit more about that? That's a great phrase. Can you say a bit more about that? So allowing and validating those feelings. I'm sure you do this all the time. It's just a reminder of that. And sometimes it can be really hard to sit with painful feelings, can't it? You know, yeah, with our children, I'm just sort of getting in touch with that. It's really hard to sit there and hear that, but it can be so powerful for somebody to feel really heard and listened to without it trying to be solved. It's just about sitting with that feeling. So modeling and giving information, you know, kind of some of the techniques that we've heard tonight, or the ways of managing anxiety, giving that information, possibly, you know, thinking about looking at websites together, or the books. Some of the books that have been mentioned tonight sound absolutely brilliant. It'd be really good to have a look through some of those. And modeling, you know, and really keep going back to Shelley's phrase that you can't pour from an empty cup. So you have to model it yourself, you know, you have to model, you have to, you know, looking after your own anxiety, your own mental health, your own well-being, and modeling that, you know. I once worked with a counsellor for parents when I was working with children in a school, and we did this presentation to families, and she said, you know, children don't really listen to a word we say, but they sort of watch and learn from everything that we do. And I thought how true that is. So modeling is a great thing to do. And I've also put this down about something that I call a parenting audit. And I think it's just about thinking about your strengths and challenges as a parent, with, you know, with all your children, with a parent or carer, with all your children, or, you know, if you're thinking about your child who's got a VI, that one in particular, you know, what are your strengths with that particular child? What are the challenges? You know, what do you face together that that you'd like to get better at? You know, parenting, we do need skills for that. We don't, you know, they don't always come, do they, very naturally? So it's kind of thinking about those and how to build on them, how to support the transitions for your child, and your own experience of being parented, it should say, which can, you know, bring up so much. That's a whole kind of topic in itself, isn't it? But kind of reflecting on that, and things that perhaps you do because of how you were parented, or you don't do because of how you were parented. It's all knowledge for how to respond, really, to your young person. Building up a support network. Absolutely, I know that's come up a lot tonight from everybody saying how they manage their anxiety. It's essential, isn't it? And people who are really your tribe, you know, who really get you, who really understand what it's like to be a parent in your position. And of course, processing your own feelings about what's happening. You know, as a parent or carer, you're absorbing so much from your child and holding that, containing it. So being able to process that somewhere else, and, you know, yeah, let out your feelings about that as well. So being able to try and do that, which might, you know, might be counselling, might be a sort of professional support, but also might be, you know, your friend with a cup of tea, or a glass of wine or something. It might be just, or your other half, you know, processing it in that way. So there's just a few ideas, really brief, but just thinking about that. One other thing that came up in some of your questions was about supporting young people when they're over 18. And I think this is such a big topic, and one that can cause loads of frustration in our service, because we support young people up to age 25. You know, that sort of between once 18 comes, thinking about what, you know, if they're not in education or employment, or even if they are, sometimes there's kind of a bit of a gap sometimes between the support that they can get as a young person and then as an adult. And so there's no easy answer to this, but I really wanted to say something about it. So I think if your child, when they're under 18, are already in a service or some services, particularly around mental health support, or education, I guess, because I guess, you know, yeah, that sort of scaffolds the support, doesn't it, around your child. Thinking about the transition really early, so being able to sort of prepare in advance to ask questions from the professionals or services that you're involved with about what support might be available when your child turns 18 and they're over 18. If they can't access a certain service anymore, what is the equivalent for an adult? And keep asking. You know, I know, again, to comment on something Shelley said about, you know, not having a lot of time for all of these things, because you are so busy managing so many other things in relation to your child. And it is a drum that you have to keep beating, and it can sometimes feel absolutely exhausting, but you have, you know, keeping asking will provide the answers for what can happen with over 18s, what support there is out there is what I mean by that. So I've just written a few organisations. The NHS obviously do a lot for adults, and that can can quite often be accessed sort of immediately through the GP, you know, and the pathways there to mental health services if that's necessary. They often do, I think, through GPs. It's really because I work throughout the UK, we offer our service, and I know services vary so much from what you can get from your GP, but I do know that there's often sort of tiered services, I want to call it. I don't know if I'm saying that, if I'm sort of describing that correctly, but there's stuff that doesn't have to be intensive support, but some kind of self-help support, guided self-help, I think it's often called. RNIB, obviously, I'm saying obviously, but they do lots for adults who have VI. And Young Minds is still a really good website. I think it's absolutely brilliant. So it talks about, you know, this is for young people who are in their older young people, so 18 and above, up to their early 20s, because, you know, brains are actually still developing up to that age as well. So it's about like looking at, it's got, Young Minds is such a good resource. It's got loads of resources about managing emotional well-being on there. So do check that out for any age young people. And the last one is one of the questions that came through from a few people, is like, when to tell your child about a diagnosis, or like what's going to happen in the future, or what you think might happen from what you've been told, but your child might not have been told that. So again, no easy answer. It's one of the reasons I wanted to tackle this, because there isn't an easy answer to this. I guess this is all about how well you know your child, and their particular anxieties, I guess, and how to manage them. But I think as a general ways of thinking about this, so thinking obviously about your child's understanding, what's their age and stage, are there any specific factors as well, additional needs that they've got that might make you think about delaying telling about the diet, telling about the condition and what's going to happen in the future. I think framing it as well, so kind of being able to give the facts, but what it might mean, what it might not mean. Obviously this means kind of living with the uncertainty, which is something I wanted to say in the reflections, which is so hard to do, but we do it all the time and we have to do it. So kind of, I think framing it with that you don't always know when something's going to happen, and what supports can be in place for certain, and the plans for certain stages of how the condition is going to progress. And of course, timing is really important. So thinking about, like, when is the best time for you as the parent or carer as well? When are you going to have space for it? Because it's probably, it's going to be a conversation that keeps coming back around as well once you give a bit more information. So when have you got, don't do it when you're feeling really full, when there's loads going on in life as well, in your household, in your home. So thinking about when you've got space for it to have those back and forth conversations, and that might come round over the next coming months, and when you as the parent or carer have got support as well. So they're just a few questions that I've picked out. I'm hoping that goes some way to sort of spark thinking about that, and some ideas for responses to those questions. So I just have to move I can see myself. I need to move that out of the way so I can see my slide. So I just wanted to, sort of, I guess, some reflections on what we've heard tonight, really. And this is from everybody who's spoken, and what we've heard. I think everybody's come in the same sort of vein of ways to look after yourself in anxiety. We can't stop anxiety. It happens. It's an important function. It's a really important feeling to have. It gives us real good information to keep us safe, psychologically and physically safe. But so it's thinking about, what we can do to manage it. So, I think we've heard from a couple of people about what to do in the acute times. So about recognizing and reducing anxiety. Immediate response, I've put down Shelley's recommendations of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the sort of sensory activity, and 5, 5, 5 breathing. And there might be some other things, obviously, that work in the acute times when you just need to bring that anxiety down. And I've put move, when all that adrenaline is going through your body, it really helps to dispel it. So that doesn't mean going out for a run or anything. Sometimes just shaking can be really, really useful for dispelling those hormones and chemicals that are going around your body that are causing the anxiety. Running up and down the stairs, somebody once said to me, that actually can be really useful. Running on the spot, dancing, we've heard a lot about dancing, haven't we? That can really just dissipate the sort of physiological reaction and therefore help settle the mind and body. So then I thought about, it feels like the things that have come up about how to manage it is around nourishing yourself and resourcing yourself. So nourishing is the hobbies. We've heard some wonderful hobbies from everybody. I love the idea of surfing. I would be absolutely petrified of that, but I love it. And the dancing and reading and listening to music, all the things that came up, playing in a band. So the hobbies that just fill your cup, and when I'm talking about these things as well, I'm thinking about things that you can do for, I think I've heard, stuff that you can do for yourself as a parent, but also how you can help your child to do these things. So finding the hobbies that really nourish you, that fill your cup, that restore you, having enough rest and restoration so that you are, there's enough in the cup so it doesn't get empty. Once the cup is really empty, it takes a lot of effort to fill it. So trying to keep it full all the time by these things. Food, good food. I know somebody else has talked about, I think it was Sarah, about, having food that nourishes, but also food that you really like sometimes, and allowing that. Some activity, again, it doesn't have to be anything really, pumping at the gym, although that might be your thing, but a walk in nature, something to get the body moving. Finding your tribe, I've talked about that is so nourishing. That can be a professional help, a mixture of professional help, of family and of friends. And I've also thought about recovering from what I've heard tonight, there are periods, aren't there, of stress in life that it just happens. Somebody talks about lockdown or teenage years. A lot of our panelists have talked about anxiety surfacing at that time. So really taking time to recover after acute periods of anxiety, not expecting your sort of levels of activity or even brain power, if that's the right word, to kind of be as it was. You do need some recovery time after an acute time of stress, really. Medication, I wanted to put that under nourish. I know we've talked about that a bit, that it can be really useful for a period of time to help manage the anxiety and the functioning. So resourcing yourself, again, we've had loads of ideas, and going back to that idea that somebody said about how it's building a toolbox, but it's really time consuming. There's no way of getting around that. You don't always have time to resource yourself in busy lives and looking after often a young person who's got some additional needs that take time, all the appointments, thinking through, making plans. So it really feels like this resourcing yourself and the nourishing yourself, it's a real sort of practice and discipline. But I think, the effort it takes to do that makes the anxiety manageable and bearable, it can make it like that. So it's kind of a payoff, I guess. So doing one thing at a time. So we've heard lots of things tonight, so I've just summarized a few. Doing one thing at a time, trying to manage one thing at a time rather than juggling lots of different things. Pause before responding. I just think this can it's a small thing, but it can really make a difference in all sorts of situations. So pause before responding to your child when they say something. Pause before responding to the professional you're sitting in front of. Pause before you think about what you're going to do next in your day. Actually, just have a little pause, a little breath. Validating yourself and how you're feeling. It's absolutely okay to feel exactly how you're feeling. It's not wrong. It's not, it's not okay. It's absolutely okay to feel how you're feeling, and validating others, the people in your family, your young person. Arming yourself with knowledge and rights for yourself and the family, and for the rights of your young person who's got a VI. Organising. We hear quite a lot of this at our, we sort of have a connecting families group about parents just talking about, or carers, how organised they have to be with appointments and school, and just kind of managing everything that they've got to manage, sitting with uncertainty. Whenever I put that down, I think it's such a skill that's practiced, I don't know if anybody ever really gets there to be able to sit with it, but we don't have to run away from that feeling of feeling uncertain. If you can make friends with the anxiety and the uncertainness of what's going to happen, that can actually be really calming. I know it's not easy, I'm not saying that, but it can be really easy. We've heard about mindfulness and using sort of methods around being present, and the transitional or self-soothing object. Grace gave us loads of ideas about that, didn't she, as well? So we've got some of those things. So that hopefully that sort of reflects some of what we've heard tonight. So sorry, I'm just going to check my time. Okay, we're nearly at 9:30. Thank you so much for all your patience. I just want to tell you a little bit about our Families First service at RSBC. So on the resource sheet that comes around is our website, so you can find lots of information there. I'll share my email, so I'm very happy to get emails and kind of speak to you about our service if this doesn't give you enough information. So in the Families First at RSBC, we offer emotional support for the impact of a visual impairment for any family where there's a young person in the family from age 0 to 25 who's got a visual impairment. So, the impact can be, as we've talked about, anxiety, low mood, things around relationships, feeling isolated, feeling stuck, loss and grief that might come up. We have family practitioners who cover areas of the UK, and what they do is go in and sort of gather information, assess family needs, and identify where support is most needed at that time. So what we can offer is sort of practical support to all family members, especially when it's perhaps a baby who's been diagnosed with a VI. So it's a completely new world then to the parent or carer. So thinking about, the systems that are in place to support young people with a VI, the pathways, kind of health and education pathways, helping connect parents who don't know about VI with their lived experience of other parents and children and young people, and what other support services might be there. So really linking people in with the supports that we've got here tonight with Look UK, with Victor, and other local services depending on where they are in the UK. And we then offer one-to-one support. So this is kind of an option, really, I guess, of what we offer: one-to-one support sessions with the young person who's got the VI. So we look at kind of building resilience, coping skills for, their emotional and mental health well-being, raising self-esteem and confidence. We offer one-to-one sessions with siblings, which again we can do the same about like working towards building resilience and self-esteem, but also understanding their role and their needs as a sibling. Again, Shelley, I've mentioned you a few times tonight, but talking about, when Shelley was talking about her boys and how our older one thinks about Max as well. And then we do offer parent work as well. So again, some of what I said before about sort of processing feelings with allowing space really for parents to process feelings, thinking about this parent audit in terms of the role of the parent, the strengths and the challenges, how they would like to feel more skilled in certain areas, and how we can offer support for that, but how we can link them in and to find other support mechanisms for that. And then linking with other systems. So sometimes it's really hard, isn't it, to kind of go along to a big professionals meeting on your own as a parent or carer, so we can kind of support with that and advocate, I guess, on some ways. So I've rushed through that, but that's because it's really late, but I just wanted to say that so that you've all got an idea of what Families First is. So really thank you for listening, and that's the end of my presentation. I'll stop sharing. Thank you, Jane.
Oh no, thank you, Nicola. It's so good to hear kind of a bit more in depth about the services you offer, because actually I love the fact it covers the whole family, it covers the siblings, it covers the parents, it covers the child with a visual impairment. And I know that your practitioners cover quite big areas, don't they?
Yeah, we do.
But the difference, I know there's families on this call that have had advocacy and through the school systems, and it really, really does help, because sometimes we need someone else to be that calming voice with our anxiety. And it's just been really helpful, and what a brilliant summary of what we've heard tonight as well. So thank you everyone for listening very, very intently. Know that Victor and Look and RSPC are here to support you and your families, and I will share the information as soon as possible. For anyone that got kicked in and out, we have recorded it, obviously, so you'll be able to catch up. Hopefully that'll be available on our website soon. I'd like to thank Sid, Grace, sorry, my words, I'm tired too. Sid, Grace, Emma, and Sarah for sharing your experiences so eloquently. And behind the scenes, there's Charlotte, who's popped up from Victor, who's been just kind of in the background, and Joe as well. But we are better together, and we are all here to try and support and lift anxiety and kind of learn from each other. So thank you all. Charlotte, did you want to say anything before we let everyone go and have a glass of wine or whatever they need to do at the end of their evening?
Yes, no, just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us. It's been a great session. Thank you to all the presenters. And as Jane said, we'll be in touch with some resources very soon. But at any time, you can email either myself or Jane or someone from RSB directly if you've got any further questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're going to send a follow-up evaluation for both of us, aren't you, on behalf of both of us?
Yeah, so this is going to be for the whole session, and I know that everyone gets filling in questionnaire fatigue and responding to emails, but it would be really, it literally takes, and it's just really helpful to myself and Jane, helps us to shape the further sessions. And we try to respond to what the parents are requesting. So if you do, when you do get the email, if you could find a few minutes to complete that, we both really appreciate it.
Yeah, and any positive, because we want to carry on and grow these sessions. So, any other comments you can make as well before you head off, it is always very appreciative. So yeah, thank you all.